You ready to go?
Yeah,
Cool. Welcome back to another special, really special episode with my very special friend, Special Simon Scriver. Good to see you, Simon.
good to see each other. You have been saying all your guests are special, so that does make me feel less special. But I've never heard you say something was special, special, special.
And your name starts with an S too, so it works well with the Special Simon. So yeah,
That's good
that's
alliteration. Good alliteration. Nice to see you, John. Thanks for
nice to see
having
you
me.
too. So I'm really excited because Simon and I always have as we've just been doing, always have the greatest and most lovely chit chats. And I'm delighted that Simon's a part of this DM clinic. Now, as far as I know, that Simon's what you're talking about isn't specifically DM related, but I think it's all part of the weaving of the different bits and bobs and moving pieces that go into some people doing direct mail and some people just living in their story of their organization. So I will pass the mic over to you, Simon.
Yeah, well, I think what I kind of flagged to speak with you, I think it is very much connected to the direct mail because I'm an attendee of your direct mail, John. I don't know if you saw me in the crowd. But I learn from you. I've said many times that a lot of what I learn about direct mail, and especially creativity in direct mail, is from you. But whenever I attend these things, I've always got my small shop hat on, like the small charity hat on.
Mhm.
And obviously, our at Fundraising Everywhere, our ethos is very much to make training accessible and stuff like that, which I think you do very well. But in particular, I wanted to flag because I know when you go to these like training things, sometimes it can feel like it's very much aimed at medium and larger organizations as they start to talk about budgets, big budgets. And I remember before we started Fundraising Everywhere, I was at a session and they were talking about a small budget they had for a fundraising campaign, and it was €1 million, like $1 million Canadian. And that
Right.
was a small budget. And you could see like 90% of the room just went, oh, just this doesn't apply to me. So I was really curious to talk to you and I guess, maybe even ask you questions, but share my experience as a consultant and having worked in a small shop charity where I did learn loads about direct mail from you. And then I had to like on a practical level apply it in a place where I was the only fundraiser and there was no budget and there was no, barely any envelopes. And it was like so having to apply it from that. And yeah, I just think small charities get overlooked sometimes. So if you wouldn't mind us chatting about that, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Go on. I'm not gonna stop you. It sounds
That's
good.
good. I remember because we were talking about this before, and I was telling you the story about when I started in this small charity, and some marketing expert offered me their time, and they were like going to tell me how to do fundraising, and they came again imagining that we were just like a much bigger charity, and they said, well, I remember one of the bits of advice they gave me was that I needed to do some split testing on our monthly donors, and we had two monthly donors. Do you know, like they imagined that we
Right.
had, it's like, we could test with 1,000 or 10,000 monthly donors here. But it was like literally it was this person versus this person. And I think like, I know as a small charity and working with small charities, sometimes you hear this advice from the big guys who are the experts, and you think you almost have to apply it, if that makes sense. But actually, I think there's like an element where some of it, small charities almost have an advantage. And the example I always give, it's like if you had to write a thank you to one person, we're all as humans really naturally good at that. We naturally write a good heartfelt thank you. We'll almost always do it handwritten, or it'll definitely be very personal
Mhm.
and it'll relate specifically to what you're thanking them for, and it'll probably say something about your relationship. It'll have all the elements of a good thank you that you teach and you talk about so much. But then as soon as you get two donors and you try and write a thank you to both of them, it loses all that personal stuff that you put in. It all loses all the reference of what they donated to. And it's like, and that's, I guess, where like segmentation starts. It's like on your second donor. It's like, what can I send to both these people? And what can I send to just like one or two people? And I found that really helpful when talking to charities who a lot of us fall into fundraising, don't really know what we're doing from the start. But when they're trying to understand segmentation and trying to understand like the value of that data, it's like I find it really easy to like break it down to those two to the small shop, to the small charity, because you have that advantage. You instinctively know how to be like a really good communicator as a human. But then as soon as you start to mail merge or you type a letter, it just changes everything. So I find that fascinating. I find it fascinating that, you know, I learned this a lot from you. It's like when you sit down to type, you start using like words you would never use,
Yeah.
you know, and you start like, yeah, just the whole thing changes. But actually, I think people need to believe in like what they naturally do, and then learn what they can from the big benchmarking and kind of work that in. And that's what I did when I worked in small charity. And I remember, you know, I'm not sure I ever told you this, but when I did our first Christmas appeal, so it was my first year in this job in a small charity, and we did our first Christmas appeal ever. Do you know, like it was the first written one ever. So we did one out by email and post. And I had this data, and a lot of it we didn't know where it came from. And you know, some of it was, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this recorded, but it was on like bits of paper around the office kind of thing, and on Excel spreadsheets and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a bit illegal, so I won't name any names. That's why I'm kind of cautious to say it. But when I was doing the first appeal, I was reading through your blogs, and I remember your Star Wars piece, which I don't know, you know, if you still push that out too much, but if anyone's watching this, highly recommend John's Star Wars thing, because you showed exactly how to write an appeal, and it was like why this is here, why we do this, and it all made sense, you know, it all really spelled out, and you'd actually created this one as if you were in the Star Wars universe. And I like stole a lot from that. You know, it was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That's been tested, that works. And then I suppose there are elements in it where you're like, well, that doesn't suit our organization, or that doesn't, you know, that's not my voice. And so I'm going to change that. And so I think that's a really good way to approach that small shop for anyone, you know, especially anyone in your clinics. It's like you have the luxury of knowledge from all these different size charities, but I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking like bigger is better, like because they're a huge charity, they must be better at fundraising.
Mm.
But I also think there's an element where we have to like reflect on ourselves and realize that naturally as humans, we're really, really good at it sometimes
Mm.
when it's one to one.
Mm.
And just as soon as you start to grow, there's almost like a bell arc in our sector where, because you and I, we've done like a lot of thank you mystery shopping, and we do like, you know, calls to charities and stuff. I've done in sessions and stuff. And when you do like a bet, there's like a bell arc of how good they are at thank yous. It's like when you contact a really small charity, they're amazing at thank yous. You know, you get the receptions like, "Oh, you're making a donation!" Like they can't believe it,
Yeah.
and they're like gushing over you, and they want to know how you heard about them and why you have a weird accent and stuff like that. And then as you get to like medium, it's like they've obviously discovered automation, you know, and they've discovered the machine that makes them efficient to cope with that volume, but they've lost all that personal stuff.
Yeah.
And then as you become like a really big charity, you become good at thanking again, because you have someone whose job is dedicated to thanking, and you have like really slick hot mail merge and things like that. You have a good like database. And yeah, so I mean, I guess like that's the mission I'm on, and you know, you're on a lot, is these all these people in the middle who fall into the trap of just like turning into a bank, you know, or
Mm.
just turning into like a machine of gratitude, or a machine of asking. And it's and that's why I've always loved your stuff, you know, and that's why I'm an attendee on your clinic. It's because it's like it does always feel very human and heartfelt, but you're really good at reconnecting us back with like writing that one person to one person, and that's where I've always been led like by that as I've gone on to do more DM, you know, in
Mm.
other organizations. I remember one of your staff taught me a really good thing, which I still share, which was when you write a letter, when you're writing a letter to your donors or an email, don't write dear first name or dear underscore and then try and like write this letter to all of them. Write dear Mary or dear John, you know, have a picture of a person and then write the letter to that one person and then replace it with first name. And actually that's like, it's such a small thing, but it just, I think that sets the tone of everything I'm trying to say on this. Is it's like there is a real human quality you can keep, you know, when you're a small charity, but you have to work as you get bigger to keep that. keep that ability. And I don't know, I'm curious what you think, because you obviously somehow
I,
you guys still work with a lot of charities and a lot of small charities. And
yeah,
um,
I get it. Like I get, it's as you know, talked about, it's easy as a consultant. Again, you've worked as a consultant, but also in a shop. It's easy for me as a consultant to say, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. I understand that people want to find faster ways to do their job, simplifying some of the process, replacing re replacing with something that you can set it and forget it. Like I totally get that, but all I'm always can bring it back to is people like be cautious, be careful. Like I know you've got a lot to do. I know the expectations are very high. I know your boss is breathing down your neck to like do whatever, but be cautious the more you remove yourself out of certain kinds of processes, it's going to have a negative effect. And even taking the time to go, I was talking about Dale, my mother-in-law, like even when I'm doing my emails to my list of people, like for even these clinics, I'm still imagining one person. I still feel like I'm emailing Simon. And so I'm going to talk in my email, talk to you like I'm talking to Simon in an email. Like, because I have to stay connected to that, So good writers are good at that, but we can't forget we're having one-on-one conversations with other human beings all the time if you're doing it right, So it's just a reminder, and however you need to do that, I think is a valid point.
I think you and other people have that drilled into me, like people like Tom Mahan and yourself and Jeff Brooks, so always talking about that stuff. And I think the other interesting thing you said there is about like that pressure, especially as a consultant, when you go to training, you see a million things that you can do, like a million things that you can make better and a million changes. And it's like, oh God, this is like I can't do all this, or I don't have capacity for that. But I think it is just like, I think a lot of consultants now are very, especially when they work with small charities, they're very not tolerance the wrong word, but very encouraging of not trying to change everything or trying to do everything at once, but just find the important little tweaks that you can do. And I think that's a really important exercise for fundraisers to do is like, well, we're just going to work on this bit because this is like the main bottleneck, or this is the main bit where people come in are in, and not realize that we can't do everything. But I'm a huge, as much as I talk about the human stuff, I'm a huge believer in automation and like really clever and smart automation and just ways to do things where we're really, really on it. I mean, when I did that small mail merge, I think by post it only went to a few hundred people or something like that. It was like it was small, but it was at the point where it was like, okay, this is too small to get a mailing house to pack this. We have to do this. And so we were faced with this option of like, okay, well, we're going to have to pack these and we're going to have to, we're going to have to use whatever envelopes are there, like these plain white envelopes. But actually, it was like, well, there's an opportunity for us, even though we're small and we have no budget, we can do this really well. So we actually like printed on all the envelopes. We with our little charity printer, most printers you can print on envelopes.
Mm.
And so we were able to print not only like a nicely written name and address because we didn't have time to write on all of them. We could mail merge and do like a mass mailing from that, but we could also make the envelope really pretty. Like we could put our own printing on it through that. And it was like I mean, I'm going to say it cost nothing because we just found the envelopes in the stationery cupboard and the printer was already there, but obviously there's ink and those were someone's envelopes that we
Yeah.
took. But it was way cheaper than a mailing house because a mailing house had like a minimum threshold, but it was also way more than if we had just sent out this plain white envelope. It was like, oh, okay, this feels personal. And then we got in volunteer. We had two volunteers who really didn't know what they wanted to do. And as fundraisers, putting like you almost don't want to put a volunteer in a fundraising position because most volunteers don't like asking for money and they're not particularly good at it. So what we found was that we could use them to just do a little handwritten note on our printed letter,
Mhm.
and so it was from the volunteer, just a little side note. But again, it was bringing in that human touch. And it was like, for me, it was like a smart use of our resources and putting it in time, as opposed to, we could have maybe got those fundraisers out shaking buckets or something like that, those volunteers shaking buckets, but actually making every single appeal we sent out have a handwritten element in a nice envelope. It was like, okay, this isn't really costing us anything except time, a bit of time, but it's having a, we believe it's going to have a big impact because of what we've seen. So I just like those little ways that we can be smart about the automation and just really, I mean, my big thing at the moment is I'm developing a whole session about mail merge now because I'm getting like obsessed with like good mail merge.
Mhm.
Because mail merge, I just think is so funny how it's like, oh, we can write personal to a whole database and we can make this feel personal and send it out in just like one click of a button. And then you still get like letters from people saying, "Dear Mr. Simon." And it's like, okay, instantly the bubble is burst, and I know this is mail merged. But you just by being a bit more sensible about what the point of mail merge is, you can be really smart about it. You can like send personal stuff. I used to have as a consultant, I had a mailing list, and I think you were on it, I don't know, but I shut it down when we started Fundraising Everywhere. And one of the things I used to do when I captured people's email addresses when people sign up was I asked what their favorite song was, and people would write what their favorite, what they were listening to at the time, that they'd say it. And then in my journey, it was like a year later, I would email them about fundraising and I would say, oh, also, I've been listening to this song recently. You might like it. It's great. And all these people wrote back with, they're like, that's my favorite song. Oh my God, I was so into that song last year. That brings me back. And like people were really like excited about it. Now it's real creepy and sleazy, but I just wanted to test it. But it is that element of like, we're learning so much about our donors every day. It's like we have an opportunity here to really customize and on a really simple level, if you're like a small animal sanctuary, if you rehome cats and you rehome dogs, you can categorize people into cat lovers and dog lovers. There might be some overlap, but then instantly you can change your communications so the picture on the envelope is a cat or a picture is a dog.
Mhm.
So there's like really like basic things we can do, which is so obviously going to have an impact on how people view us and how they engage with us. And I think, yeah, that's just the flag I'm flying today. Is it's like it's accessible even for small organizations. You might not be able to do the flashy things like the big ones do, but it's like everything you teach, it's like there's knowledge to be pulled from that and drilled down into, okay, is this for us yet? Maybe not. Maybe it's when we get bigger. But if it is, how can we replicate these learnings on our scale, like on our small scale with our database, while staying connected to that one-to-one donor communication, which is like we're all gifted with. So yeah, but I mean, you're always good at that. You're always good at keeping the small charities in mind. I just hate it when you go to conferences and stuff, and it's like they're talking to you like you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on your database, and it's like, no, I'm in the hundreds or less. Do you know?
Yeah, and I would say most people who are watching this probably would fall into that sort of smaller to medium-sized category. There are a couple bigger charities who also are part of the clinics and stuff, but I think even if you're very, very big, you still have to come back to that intimate conversation you're having with people,
Yeah.
and put the hard work in. Like there's just you don't get an easy street just because you have 100,000 donors on your list or
I
whatever,
mean,
whatever it is.
you forget so quickly, don't you? Like when you're a big
Yeah,
organization, because it's like, I mean, I would say like anyone listening to this, it's like, when's the last time you signed up to your newsletter, or when's the last time you made a donation? Because you
yeah,
might be surprised what they're all getting.
yeah.
Do you know? And we see it all the time in the company. It's like if every few months I'll put myself on the journey that a new person's going on. And it's like, oh, that's like, A, that's not relevant right now, or that's not the headspace they're going to be in when they sign up to this. Like, that's not the next logical step. So it's like, it's always worth reviewing it. It's like if you're ever at a loss of what needs to change in your program, I would say just like sign up to your newsletter with a new
Goodness.
email, sign up to your donor, and it's going to jump out at you straight away, like what's hitting your donors in the face immediately after that donation. And it can be really scary sometimes. But most of us don't know, most of us don't know what that journey is anymore because we set it up years ago, or we weren't involved when it got set up and we've never really thought about it. But it's so important. Hey. That's all I had to say, really. I don't
That's
think.
I'm like trying to think like how do I sum this up when I'm uploading these videos to YouTube and stuff? You have to enter like a description and stuff like that. But I think what you've just provided is actually a ton of like just small shop little lessons and things that you've picked up through your own business and through your own working at charities and stuff like that. And like I said, it's to me, it's fascinating to be doing these with my friends and colleagues and hearing their reflections on some things very, very specific and granular and not deviating away from it. And some are more like, and I'm taking some steps back here and I'm reflecting or I'm like trying to pull some longer threads together here in this conversation. So
But I mean, this is my like bugbear, not bugbear, but it's like my focus is like, well, how does this apply to the solo fundraiser who's maybe just in the job, who is not getting any support, who doesn't have any budget? Like, how does this apply to that? Like, that's who we try and represent. You know, we have a lot of large members, and there's stuff for everyone. But I mean, really, the core of why we set up is because we found like a lot of the training out there wasn't applicable to 90% of the people, or 90% of the people couldn't even get access to it.
yeah.
So I think it is like that's why I get all riled up about it. And obviously, you know, you're kind enough to give me the space to chat about it. But I was reminded of it, you know, sitting through your GM clinics as they started, and it's like, oh yeah, like this is I remember going on this journey of actually listening, looking at some of John's case studies and thinking, how do I do this in this organization by myself?
Mhm.
And it was so helpful. So yeah, I'm grateful.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm grateful with our time as always. So thanks for coming out today. Appreciate it. And we will see everyone on the next special, not so special this one, but special, sort of special episode of these special clinics. Thanks, Simon.